Well, thanks again, everyone. Appreciate having you here today for our large-scale tree planting campaigns. I know this is something that a lot of communities are talking about. It's something that nations are putting out forth towards people, whether they're a million trees, 500,000 trees, whatever it might be. These things can seem really daunting. We know they're good marketing campaigns. We know they bring people in. But then what happens when the rubber hits the road, as people say, when you really have to start planting, tracking, making sure that these things are happening and reporting to people ultimately. And that's what we're going to hear about today. So before that, I just want to share a little bit about the Urban and Community Forestry Society. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a little presentation and then we'll jump into the conversation. Willie or Judy, can you see my slides? I should have practiced myself ahead of time.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks again, everybody. Great to have you here. I'm Leslie Burkus, Executive Director of the Urban and Community Forestry Society, or UCFS as we go by. We have recently rebranded from the Society of Municipal Arborists, and I'll talk about that here in a second, but really happy to have you here. So first, again, an introduction to the organization. I saw many familiar names on there, so you probably are familiar, but if you're new, want to make sure you feel like you know how you can engage with us and what our job is, how we try and support urban forestry professionals. Then we'll jump into a presentation from Willie Park, the Urban Forest Coordinator with Sandy Springs, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and Judy Yee, the Director of Marketing and Outreach with Trees Atlanta, a really wonderful nonprofit. I had the benefit of going to visit them in person to just hear everything about what they do. So I've gotten to know Judy over the years and excited to hear how Trees Atlanta is serving as a lead for 1 million trees, how cities like Sandy Springs are measuring and making sure that the work happens, their commitment. So the whole idea is that many cities within the metro area of Atlanta signed on to this 1 million trees campaign. Sandy Springs is an example of that. And how are those two working together? How's the nonprofit and the city work together, and how's everyone meeting their commitments? And you might be surprised to hear that there are some challenges and successes with things like this, and that's what we're going to hear about at the end. And then, of course, plenty of time for Q&A because we saw some of your questions ahead of time and know this could be things you might be taking on and wondering how you might make it happen in your community. So with that, please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. It's so great to see where everyone's from. We often have people from across the globe. So please drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Let's see who's here. This webinar is being recorded, and I will make that available to you afterwards, and you can either rewatch it or share it with colleagues or people you might be working with. One ISA CEU has been approved for this webinar, and I will share a link at the end of the webinar for you to put your ISA information into. And then you all are on mute, and I will take you off of mute when we get to the Q&A session. Feel free to use the chat or the raise your hand function, and we'll hear from you then. Okay. Urban and Community Forestry Society, what do we do? Well, here's our mission. It's to build the confidence, competence, and camaraderie of all professionals who manage trees and forests to create and sustain more livable communities. So I like to break that down a little bit further and say that we're really the professional membership home for the people who make and support daily tree planting and care decisions in communities. If you're hired by your city to manage trees, if you work for a nonprofit and you are working with your city to plant trees, maybe you're the state urban forestry coordinator and you're supporting the people who make those daily on the ground tree planting decisions, we want to be your membership home. There's strength in having association. There's strength in having those professionals together because you get to learn from people like Willie and Judy who are doing this work every day. You get a seat at the table and your voice is lifted up. That collective voice of the work you're doing, that's why people join associations, so that their voice is lifted, people understand their profession better. Our job's to help advocate for you, maybe to American Public Works Association or Parks and Recreation, or maybe that true idea of advocacy, talking to legislators about what it means to be an urban forester today. That's why people join an association. If you're a member, we really appreciate it. If you're not, hope you'll consider joining. So a little bit more about UCFS. We were founded in 1964 as SMA, but like I said, we just have changed our name. We are a 501c6 membership-based organization with international members. And that's really because of that next point. We are a professional affiliate of the International Society of Arboriculture, which means that we just help ISA take on a specific aspect of arboriculture. So we are our own organization, but we work very closely with ISA to make sure urban forestry and community forestry are really raised up in profile and seen as they should be. And we're a partner in community forestry with Arbor Day Foundation, Alliance for Community Trees, and the Urban Wood Network, among many other partners. But we work really closely with these three again, rising tide lifts all boats, making sure that the work that each entity is doing is combined. We're growing the pie instead of just cutting a larger slice for ourselves. We want to see it growing for urban forestry on the whole. So like I mentioned, hello to the new Urban and Community Forestry Society. If you hadn't heard, surprise, this is our new name. We launched in October, and our mission has not changed. I want to make that really clear. The mission remained the same, but we needed to make sure we were being more inclusive and representative of the people who are doing that daily tree planting and care decision. So our logo was updated. We have a brand new website that I think puts our best face forward. And then we're increasing our social media presence with a new YouTube channel where we are posting all of our past learning series, ways for people to get engaged. Because we both want to promote the professionals and the profession of urban forestry. Your job gets easier when more people understand the work you're doing. And so that's another aspect of what we're trying to do every day. Some of our offerings that we offer to our members and others are our City Trees publication, which you see here. Hopefully you're familiar with that and hopefully you get it in your inbox. This is an open source publication. Your membership dues help us make sure we can put this publication out. But ultimately, it's really great information from technical information to human interest stories, learning more about the people doing this work. It's for yourself, but you could also see sharing this with your tree board, maybe your city manager, people who need to know more about urban forestry. That's why we want to make this open source. Another thing, I'll talk about a few in a second, but our annual conference, please save the date for November 18th to the 21st, Chicago, Illinois. That is where the Partners in Community Forestry Conference will be, and UCFS's conference as well. So more to come on that, but save the date for November 18th, and we'll see you in Chicago. Just a couple of programs that we are able to offer. Our Arborist Exchange program is a members only opportunity, and this helps pay for you to go and see urban forestry work on the ground. So maybe you hear from Willie at the end of this and you say, gosh, I really would love to see what's happening in Sandy Springs. Hopefully Willie is willing to host you there. And then you could go see it in action, and we help pay for your travel to get there. It could be a one-way or two-way exchange. Maybe you have a partner you've been really working with across the country and you'd love to kind of swap. That is what this is for. The applications just closed for that, but they will be open again by, or you can apply now and we'll review them on May 30th. Our Urban and Community Forestry Society mentoring program is open currently, another members only opportunity, and this will close on the 29th of December. So you might be feeling in a place where you could really talk to somebody and hear how they've been experiencing urban forestry. This could be kind of an inherent idea of mentoring, which is someone with more knowledge to someone with less or just newer in the industry. Maybe we could think of this as peer-to-peer mentorship. And we also want to think of reverse mentoring as well, learning from somebody who's maybe younger or has some new, fresh ideas within urban forestry. This is how we really try and build our mentor program. But often people think of that as more knowledge to someone who's just entering the industry. So we'll really welcome you to join. We try and match as many pairs as we can. You really guide the conversation. We give you some framework, but that's really up to you guys to decide how things go from there. So hopefully you can apply for that. Our accreditation program is going through a little bit of renewal and looking at that as well. So after I'm done talking, I'm going to drop a survey here. Accreditations are for your program. How's your city? What are the gold standards that your city is trying to achieve? And you try and align those to what our organization has seen through input from other foresters. So we just want to make sure it's still up to date. It's still meeting the standards. That's why we're doing a survey. I'm going to drop that in the link. Would really appreciate your feedback, no matter if you had no idea we had one or you knew it and you're currently accredited. We want to hear from lots of people. Our next learning series, January 10th, I will also put a link for that. It's called the Citizens Toolkit, Tools to Engaging Private Property Tree Planting from the folks at the University of British Columbia. This is going to be a really interesting one for more of a volunteer side of things. Maybe you're doing neighborhood engagement, and how could you get more the lay person, your neighborhoods, your community members to understand the importance of trees. They have this really great thing I can't get on my head. It's called the like squirrel coefficient. And you just talk to people in a neighborhood and you say, could a squirrel get from tree to tree without coming down to the ground? And what a interesting way to frame that for the people who might not know what tree canopy is. They see squirrels in their community. So it could be a really great one if you're trying to do more neighborhood engagement. Finally, if you are a member, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. Your membership dues help make things like this possible, helps make all those programs possible. You get a voice, you get your seat at the table, and you get that network. You get to be with the people who know and understand you. If you're not a member, really hope you'll join us when the time is right. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to kick it over to Judy. Oops. Judy, you ready?
I am. Let me see. Let's see if I can do it though. Share. Okay, do we see?
Yep, we can see your first slide.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. It's exciting to address this audience. Just watching the names and locations roll in the chat. It makes me think about something that I wasn't really focused in on as I pulled this deck together. Trees Atlanta is a very local organization, but although audience is very international and all over the place with very differing kind of circumstances, I think what's important is that regardless of this body, everything that I say has to be localized to wherever you are. So take it with a grain of salt because it really reflects the situation here in Atlanta, Georgia, not only our literal climate, but the tone of our communities and the moment that we're in right now. So if you have a question that that you want to relate to your individual city, please do take the opportunity to ask us during the Q&A. And I hope we do have a lot of time for Q&A because I think that's where the magic occurs. So just to launch things off, Trees Atlanta is a very people-centric organization. So I just want to start off by introducing myself as a person within this organization. Hello. My name is Judy Yee. My history with the organization is I was first a volunteer 20 years ago. I planted my first tree with the organization when I used to work for in the private sector in corporate America. Over those years, I've always been drawn to what the organization was doing and always came back. I relocated throughout the country a number of times with my corporate job. But once I decided that I was done with all of that, I just had a unique opportunity to join the staff of Trees Atlanta, and I've been there since 2015. I've had a number of different roles within the organization, but currently I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach. Trees Atlanta is a relatively large organization, as I will cover in the next slides, but you are looking at the entire marketing and outreach department. So a lot of what we do is we get very creative. We rely on the power of partnership. And we really leverage our relationships with others, other people, other organizations like ours in other cities, our city partners, colleagues like Leslie and Willie, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So in that vein, even after this presentation, I welcome you to jot down my contact information, which I'll provide at the end. And please reach out. One of the goals that we have as an organization is to make sure that we share our experience, the knowledge that we've gained through our experience and our expertise. That is the mission, to make sure that community forestry is available and accessible to as many people as possible. So with that said, let me jump right in and tell you a little bit more about our organization. So Trees Atlanta, our mission statement is that we are a nonprofit community group that protects and improves Atlanta's urban forests by 3 pillars: planting, conserving, and educating. Since our founding in 1985, we've planted over 165,000 trees. And in the last program year, some of our key metrics I'm sharing on screen. Every single year, we plant about a little under 9,000 trees to date. We do conservation work in over 1,000 acres of green space. And we do this with about 10,000 volunteers that pass through our organization. In fiscal year 23, they gave us about 43,000 hours of volunteer work. We also are in about 43 different schools. And we also do a youth job training program, because one of the areas that we saw there was a critical need is to make sure that there was a future pipeline of urban foresters coming through our communities. And we're very excited to say that we moved to a new headquarters at the beginning of this year. I can't believe it's already been 12 months since we moved in. I wish I had more time to show off that new building, and hopefully many of you will pass through Atlanta and visit us at the Trees Atlanta Candida Treehouse. So the first major pillar, and what we're most well known for, but by far not the only thing that we do, is Trees Atlanta is known for planting. So as I said, we plant about 9,000 trees throughout Metro Atlanta every single year. This particular team are divided into two organizations. One is Urban Trees. They really handle the large tree planting for our municipal partners. One of our major contracts is the Atlanta Beltline. If you're familiar with that, it is a 22-mile long greenway project in the city of Atlanta. Trees Atlanta was one of the people, or one of the organizations, who transformed that project by saying, let's make it more than a transit project. Let's make it into a linear arboretum. And we're on our way. We've already planted 11 miles of that linear arboretum. And by the time that the Beltline is finished, we hope that the Atlanta Beltline Arboretum will be the world's longest linear arboretum. We're pretty excited about that. We have a partnership, for example, with Downtown Atlanta that we just started not too long ago, to plant 8,000 trees in downtown Atlanta. It makes a nice full circle, because our very first trees in 1985 were planted in downtown. That year, we planted 46 trees. And again, now we're planting about 9,000 every single year. Neighborwoods is a project that many of you might be familiar with. It is our volunteer-based tree planting. About 60% of all the trees that we plant are actually planted by volunteer, with the coordination of our staff. Not only do we do planting, but we also do tree care. Some exciting programs that we've created to get people interested and engaged year-round is we have something called Plantlanta, which is a celebration of our relationship with the city of Atlanta. And we plant 600 trees in just 2 days all across the city. People like big goals, and it might be an idea that many of you guys could share with your own cities. And I think Willie would talk a little more about the Front Yard Tree Program, but this is a program that allows us to work with our cities and counties to plant in non-public spaces. Majority of our trees are planted in public city spaces, but the Front Yard Tree allows us to treat the front easement of people's front yards as city easements, and put trees funded by city programming. The next area is conservation. It is less well known, but probably one of the more rapidly expanding part of our work. We work on removing invasive species and replanting with native trees and plants, and showing people how to care for their green spaces and preserving their existing canopy. A lot of attention is given on planting new trees, which is incredibly important. But what we really need to be doing, working hard in the background, is making sure that we're conserving the existing canopy that we have. And in fact, I know many of you are interested in learning more about the 1 Million Tree Initiative. The 1 Million Tree Initiative is really a conservation story, and we'll get into that in a moment. So education is our third pillar. We have the standard education programming like speaker series, workshops, Q&As, things for the public training programs for volunteers. We also do offer many programs that offer ISACU hours. It's a wonderful way for professionals to be tapped in on community forestry and get some hours in. We also do tree tours around the city to showcase the spaces that we're all working to make beautiful. And we have not only our summer camp program and our school programs, but we have a youth job training program. So this year we graduated 59 high school students in something that we call the Youth Tree Team. It is a paid program, and we're super excited about it. We're in our 8th year of this program, and we're already starting to see these young graduates come back not only on our staff, but they're going to other organizations and carrying on that urban forestry work. So all of those programs and all that we're able to achieve cannot be achieved by our small staff alone. There's only about 65 to 70 full-time employees at any given moment. We do flex up to about 150 to 170 during the summer because of our seasonal work and our teen hirees that we have, but we truly are a community group. It is our volunteers that help us make this happen. And it's going to be volunteers and the community members that you engage that will really make your programs come alive. So regardless of the program that you're implementing in your cities, without the engagement and the hands-on activity of those community members, I don't think that we can achieve as much as we have the potential to. So sliding into the next topic of conversation, which is the 1 Million Tree Initiative, one of the facts about the Atlanta metro area is that we're currently at about 5 million people population in our 21 county footprint. Our metro Atlanta gets larger and larger, but the Atlanta Regional Commission treats our metro Atlanta as 21 counties. As you can see by this kind of like a little blurry growth chart, we're supposed to grow by 50% by 2050. Where most of the growth occurs is right around the center, which is the concentration of where Trees Atlanta works. We work in the 5-county area radiating out from the city of Atlanta. It is this growth that presents the most exciting opportunities for an urban area, but it's this potential growth that presents a lot of threats and the biggest challenges for the people who are in this audience. We know that we are losing trees. We just have to open our eyes to see that pattern. We don't need statistics to tell us that. We know that we still have trees are a living thing, that age, pests, invasive species are a constant threat to our canopy. But what we're seeing as a community organization is that it is intentional removal and the pressures of development that presents perhaps a greater threat to our urban canopy, exactly where most of our population are living today. So because of the situation, and because, let me also give the specifics about the city of Atlanta. For example, the map on the right shows a canopy heat map. Wherever you see the red is where we lack canopy. Wherever you see green is where we have canopy. In the city of Atlanta, there's only been 3 canopy assessments done ever in the city. In 2008, which is our baseline, we had 47.9% canopy cover in the city of Atlanta. All the way to our most recent in 2018, we're at 46.5%. Put in terms of square footage or square mileage, in that time, we've lost a little over 2 square miles of canopy. Imagine that's the size of some small cities or townships. Imagine if the entire area was covered in trees, that entire city is gone. So what we also know is that what drives this loss are 2 things. It's not only the tree protection ordinance, but what also drives it is zoning codes, meaning how does a municipality, a city or a county treat what is allowed to be built on a particular parcel of land and what can be done on that parcel of land. I propose, having kind of thought through the tree protection ordinance in the city of Atlanta for as many years as we have, it might be the zoning code that almost supersedes what the tree protection ordinance can do to protect the canopy of a city. And I see some questions coming in. Unfortunately, I can't read them while I'm presenting, but I hope we have time to answer them. So we'll return to them at some point. And so what the other observation or the other statistic that we know from these assessments is that in the city of Atlanta, 77% or 75% of that canopy is on single family residential property. What that means to us is that we have to be very mindful about how we're communicating and educating homeowners. A lot of people get very excited and a lot of attention is given to the large parcel of land where there's a clear-cut event that occurs. that is a different set of issues that we can address differently. But where the biggest momentum potential is on those single family residential property. That's why Truth Atlanta spends so much time educating the public and trying to get them excited and give them resources on how to do something to protect their city's canopy. So put it another way, in the city of Atlanta, for example, this is a chart done by one of our community members. They went back and looked at some city data that we were finally able to get. If you see the dark green bar, that's the number of trees that are healthy, that are removed. In the city of Atlanta, our tree protection ordinance says you cannot remove healthy trees from your property unless the zoning code allows you to do so. What that means is if you want to build a house on a parcel and it's within a buildable area, the way that our city regards that tree is it's in the way of a building, therefore you can remove it regardless of its health. The light green bar you see at the top is the trees that are DDH. What we've noticed is that the number of trees that are DDH tend to escalate when there's more development in the development activity, which is kind of ironic. If you want to take a cynical view of it, suddenly when a developer wants to infill in a parcel, every tree on the parcel suddenly becomes DDH. And we can have a conversation about the dynamics between DDH and removal of healthy trees during Q&A. So what can be done? What really makes a difference in our ability to protect trees or to improve our tree canopy? In our assessment as an organization, it really is the will and the means. As urban foresters, you know very well what the means include, which is your power to enforce. Is there funding available from your city or county or other governmental funding source? And is there capacity, meaning that we talked about the pipeline of professionals is, you might even have funding for 3 more arborists, but do you have the number of bodies to fill those roles? So we know that there's this pressure in our partner cities that cover these areas. What might be an area that we can help influence is the will. It's about education. What are people's attitudes and understandings about why we need to protect trees? It won't come as a surprise to you that a lot of people think you are trying to save trees because they're pretty. We know differently. We know that it's key city infrastructure. We know that it's critical elements to our city's health and well-being. So many different things. And then the priority, it might be code word for, do you have leadership that really is standing by this initiative? Because if you do not have key sponsorship within your city lead or your municipal leadership, it's really hard to get attention to it. So these are the main reasons that we started the 1 million tree initiative, is to give a framework so that tree professionals could get attention around these issues. It also expanded a fourth area of our work, which is advocating. We are not technically an advocacy organization. As a 501c3, we're limited in how much work that we can do in that regard. We do no lobbying. However, we do use our influence and expertise in the community to try to educate the right people who do have the power to change those policies. So there's a number of different ways that we work with the communities in this advocating role, whether it's canopy conversations where we go into neighborhoods and community groups and have conversations with them about and create strategies on how to work, how to improve the canopy in their very small neighborhood scale. We have the 1 million tree initiative that I'll describe a little bit more. But at the end of the day, 1 million tree initiative, it really is an education and influencing program. It gives a framework for you as professionals to go to your city leaders and leverage this kind of partnership and collaboration that we are creating regionally to kind of inspire and even, make them be a little more competitive to keep up with what the neighbor cities are doing. I do a lot of work on the tree protection ordinance. It is incredibly difficult rock to move. For example, the city of Atlanta, we've been working since 2018 to update our ordinance, we're still not there. And then lastly, we do other efforts like the new city forest certification, in which we go from property to property and show individuals and businesses and other property owners how to make their particular parcel part of a network of a connected urban forest. All of these things can be discussed for an hour each themselves, but since we don't have time, I'll leave these links and hopefully you'll have time to explore them on your own. So let's talk about the 1 Million Tree Initiative. So far, we have 13 metro partners. What this means is these cities, either their mayor or their city council or their county commissioners have passed a resolution or signed a letter that says, we are in it. We will help promote and educate our communities about the importance of trees. And we make a commitment to plant more trees and conserve trees. What the community partners are Atlanta-based conservation partners who have the ability to help give these cities information and resources and partnerships to help those programs actually happen. We have 2 new partners this year, and they're nurseries, Pike Nurseries and Gardenhood. One is large and one is very small. These partners have said, what we're going to do is educate our shoppers on the value of native species trees. And then we have opened up a new categories of trees counted called influence trees, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So what is the 1 Million Tree Initiative? At the end of the day, it's really about support and shared accountability. If no one is paying attention to these numbers and the patterns of what's happening in each of these cities and counties and other governmental areas, who knows what's happening? As you know, the adage is, if you don't measure it, it doesn't count, or we count things that matter to us. Not all things can be countable, but it does give us a good benchmark to know on an annual basis. We're able to go back to the municipal leadership and say, hey, how many trees have you planted? And there have been some years where even the 1 Million Tree Partners will come back and say, we have not planted a single tree in our city this year. It's a moment for people to have a moment of reckoning to say, what are we doing? Is it because our data systems are not good enough to track the activity that we're doing? Or have we not prioritized it? Or did we not allocate the budget? It really is an opportunity for us to revisit these city partners and say, what are our plans? Do we have an intentional pathway to plant and conserve more trees? What we've observed in the 3 years that we've been doing this is we're not going to plant our way to a solution. It really is about conserving. And in our definition of conservation, we ask that cities identify parcels of forested land and put it into perpetual conservation so that it can't be one day it's a park and the next day it gets turned over and it gets raised to become something else. So to date, there's 114,000 trees planted, conserved, or influenced. That is a number that has a large gap to 1 million. But we think that the process of monitoring, the process of talking about this on an annual basis is really the gain that you'll get by supporting a program like this. So here is an example of what we send back to the partners every year. This is our year 3 progress report. We'll give them a breakdown of what the categories look like. And it dives into different kind of high-level analysis. We try to compare not only in the total numbers, but how well is each partner doing based upon the square mileage of the city. For example, the city of Atlanta is 136 square miles, but the city of Hateville is 2.44 square miles. We can't expect both to perform in the same way. And the metric that might be most important that we think is most relevant is how well are you doing with your population? We know that urban trees are important because that's where the most people live. A lot of people think that that's backwards, but we really need to be thinking about where do we make the biggest impact? The biggest impact is the area closest to where the most people live. So there's a number of different ways that we kind of slice and dice it to get people interested in the topic of urban trees. And if you go to our website, which is treesatlanta.org, 1 million trees, you'll be able to download the data on all 3 years. And then we report on what the takeaway is. Oops, sorry. What the takeaway is for each of the city. And I know I'm bumping against my time, so I'll end with the last slide, which is there are other advocacy resources that we have available on our website and other places. In particular, I really would like to point to you 2 tools. One is a tree equity tool by the American Forest. It helps you identify areas within your city that might have the highest priority or need for more canopy cover. And the other is the climate and economic justice screening tool. The reason I bring up the CJUST tool is the federal government is using this particular identification to provide a lot of funding. So funding is obviously an important element. So that is a tool that you might want to get familiar with. So here is my email and my phone number. And obviously you can find all this information on our website. And I'm looking forward to answering your Q&A. And then I think I'm turning it over to Willie.
Hey, Judy, thanks for that. I hope a lot of people got a lot out of that presentation. As I start sharing my deck, I wanted to share a little story about my career. After I graduated with my environmental science degree, my first job was actually with Trees Atlanta. I was hired to be a part of that youth tree team program. And then I helped plant a lot of the West Side Beltline Arboretum, manage a lot of invasive species. And so a lot of my community service and the idea of people within the forest, not just the trees for the sake of the trees, but the trees for the sake of the community. You know, the trees are the city. A lot of that was instilled in me through Trees Atlanta. So I always like to give them a big shout out for everything that they've done. And truly, I don't think that I would be here without Trees Atlanta helping me launch my career. So really big shout out to them, and I'll get started here. My name is William Park. I'm the Urban Forest Coordinator for the City of Sandy Springs. This is a little overview of our City Hall area that we just created. It's my information here on the screen. This will be repeated at the end. And one cool thing about this picture here is this is the King and Queen Tower in Sandy Springs, and the skyline in the background is the city of Atlanta. So we really are contiguous, and our forest is contiguous. And so the idea of regional management, planting trees across the entire metro area, has really been conceived and operated by Trees Atlanta again. And so again, huge shout out if you guys are looking to create a public-private partnership. This is a really great model that you guys can potentially copy paste into wherever you guys are. And so I won't go too deep into this. The history of Sandy Springs, we were incorporated in 2005, 6th largest city in Georgia, 2nd largest city in the metro area. Our first canopy study was conducted in 2013, and we found that we had a 58.7% canopy coverage. Huge, we love it. But again, we were incorporated pretty recently, and so there is still a lot of development to be done. So in further slides, you will see that that number is actually decreasing a little bit, but we're trying to reverse that momentum. Next slide. So this is an aerial of the city. You can see that Metro Atlanta is fairly green. However, if you start zooming in on this picture, you'll see that we're losing canopy on single family residences, you know, just like the city of Atlanta. And so I want to remind people that if you just look at the big picture, you often lose the actual data. You might be saying, oh, when I drive around, I see a lot of greenery. But if you go to the backyards, you'll see that there's a lot less trees than there used to be. Because again, it's all about that perspective. So again, in 2013, we had a 58.7% canopy coverage, and we do our canopy cover study every 2 years. It is a huge blessing and a privilege that we have a GIS division in City Hall that helps us coordinate all this. And so you'll see that we actually went up in 2017, and that's because of a large planting effort, and those trees were coming to maturity. But then it quickly drops back down to 58.1 as we continue to develop. And so this is just a heat map. I'll go through this 2019 canopy. And so our most recent canopy study done this year using data from 2021, we calculated it to be 58.1%. We thought we had maintained canopy coverage over the past 2 years. But then we thought, hey, we have a new product called NearMap, and we want to see if AI can get a more accurate picture. And so when we used that AI program, we found that it was at 55% actually, a historic low for the city. And for those of you who are better at statistics than me, you will understand that at a 95% confidence interval with less than 1% margin of error, this is about as accurate as we can get. And so this was a big revelation to a lot of people in the city. Wow, we thought we were much higher. 55% is still a great UTC. However, a 3% drop represents thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of trees, And so that really shocked us, and we really wanted to right the ship. And so a few years ago, we established the tree fund. And so the Sandy Springs Tree Fund was established as an in lieu compliance method for developers and landowners. And it funds these projects. So capital improvement projects and plantings happen on city facilities, public land. We do invasive removals, maintenance of trees in the right-of-way and parks. We pay for our partnership with Trees Atlanta, and we also do continuing education, and the tree fund also funds my position. I think this is a really important detail because in a lot of municipalities, a lot of organizations, there isn't just a single person handling this. The tree responsibilities are often delegated to public works or community development, or maybe even Parks and Rec with somebody who cares about the trees, And so we have been able to develop this program around having this position. And so when we were established, the tree fund was established simply to replace tree canopy or canopy preservation because we wanted to, again, maintain our canopy and contribute to the Metro Atlanta forest. How are we funded? So this is a very important part because all of this has to do with money, really. And so I won't get too lost in the weeds, but you can see how we calculate our canopy coverage. You can see kind of how we find people. And so we're really trying to encourage compliance and compromise rather than people simply cutting down trees and paying into the tree fund. So we actually have a quite strict policy there. And so City of Sandy Springs is a very wealthy tax base, and so we actually we weren't applicable for a lot of these grants from the IRA funding because we don't have a lot of those CGEST areas inside of our city. And so we actually do all of our work through primarily internal funding. I want to go quickly through our tree ordinance. When is a tree removal permit required? If you see here, we try to be as inclusive as possible. But for anyone who really knows some of these trees in the southeast of Georgia, a 10-inch DBH dogwood or redbud is legendary. You may never ever see that. And then we also have protected trees. It's like a pine tree needs to be 32 inches DBH to be protected, And so we have a tree ordinance, but it's actually not as strict or as specific as we want it to be. And that contributes to the loss of our canopy. And so for those of you guys who are looking to create a tree ordinance for the first time in your municipality, be careful where you guys are making compromises, where you guys are setting standards. Because kind of like the city of Atlanta, revising our tree ordinance is very difficult. Our council and the public are saying, well, we got one already. Why don't we just keep that on the books? Why are we putting so much time into this? And it's because we we got to make it stricter if you want to save our canopy. So for those of you guys doing it for the first time, remember to think about what the language is that you want to put inside. And so this is where I start to get really into the meat and potatoes. For a lot of municipalities in Georgia, this is actually quite a high standard. We require that residential land use is required to have a 35% canopy coverage, and commercial land use is required to have a 40% canopy coverage. Now, that is a pretty solid metric, but if people are simply complying with this, guaranteed our canopy coverage will below 50%. And so what can we do? How can we mitigate this? If the minimum is 35 and 40%, how do we increase our canopy over time, right? And so that's where private and public partnerships come into play with Trees Atlanta. And that's where education and our planting efforts come into play as well. So a little bit more into our landmark trees. So what kind of trees are protected? What trees can be cut down? What can't be cut down? And again, if you see here, hardwood tree 27 inches diameter, pine tree 30 inches. These are pretty large, but again, we require that they are replanted at 100% of the lost canopy. A big caveat, though, for the city of Sandy Springs is that it must be replaced, or you could simply pay into the tree fund. And so we have found that developers are really just paying into the tree fund. So even though we have these rules on the books, there's nothing saying that they can't clear cut and simply give us the money. And so if you guys are familiar with the Metro Atlanta area, Sandy Springs is where a lot of artists and actors and actresses built their homes. And so there's a lot of wealth here. And so huge houses are being built on these lots, and they're cutting down a lot of their canopy to accommodate for these huge houses. And so that is something that we are trying to fix. So our urban forestry program, what I really want to talk about, what are our goals? How can we do large-scale plantings? How can we manage our urban forest? So our main objective is to conserve and grow our canopy. We are trying to establish a citywide minimum canopy cover at 50%, simply saying we will not allow ourselves to go underneath a 50% canopy coverage. But that's extremely difficult because 95% of the urban in Sandy Springs is held on private land. And so, okay, well, if I, as the urban forest coordinator for the city, only have true purview over 5% of the urban forest, how can we convince and educate the residents, the commercial owners, to conserve those trees? How do we make them care? And so we do what I like to say is like top-down management, where we are trying to set the best example possible, really beautify these areas with native plantings, true successional management. And then when folks come to our parks, they see the work that we're doing on public lands, they say, wow, that looks really great. How can we do that on our land? And then we flood them with the free resources. You know, here are some literature and resources on how to recreate this on your own land. And so one of the main goals of this year is we're trying to incorporate silviculture practices for successional forest management. Essentially, what we're trying to do is, we know that about 60 to 70% of our urban forest are tulip poplars and white oaks. Great large canopy trees. You know, we love these trees, but it's not the species diversity that we need. And so we're looking to create artificial disturbances, do some selective thinning, and try to replant to allow for that diversity. We're actually working to create a volunteer program, much like that in Trees Atlanta, where we can get folks more involved and more actively involved in taking care of our green spaces and trees. And so we're working on developing that. And we're also trying to collaborate with neighboring municipalities for regional impacts. So I'll get more into that later. And so here are some of our outcomes. We have one park designated by the Old Growth Forest Network. It's the John Ripley Forbes Big Tree Forest Preserve. And I'm actually working with our volunteer group to get another parcel recognized by the Old Growth Forest Network. This is really important because these parcels, number one, they represent what used to be and what we are striving to recreate, but also it generates a lot of buzz and press that these areas are under permanent protection through this recognition. And that's how we can really work to conserve that forest. We've planted 2,000 trees plus since 2018. We're at Tree City USA for 14 and Tree City World for 4 years. And we've worked to pass a lot of policies. The one policy I really want to talk about today is the Supported Wildlife Index for our recommended tree species list. I said earlier that 95% of that forest is going to be on private land. And so, how can we influence that private land is saying, hey, if you're going to develop and replant, we want you to replant the trees that we want you to plant. And so on our recommended tree species list, we strongly favor native and naturalized trees and have actually created an index for our large canopy trees that have a score that kind of factor in wildlife support, habitat creation, contribution to forage richness, and then also because a lot of people in Sandy Springs love Doug Tallamy and the Backyard National Park, we actually have a score for how many Lepidopteran larval hosts and Lepidopteran adult species that these trees support. And so by offering people more considerations for their trees than just having to plant, we give them a sense of ownership in the process. So, hey, if you really love to go birding, here are trees that really support bird life and bird diversity because we're underneath the Atlantic Flyway, for those of you who like birds. We're next to the Chattahoochee River. And so we have a lot of floodplain. There's a lot of flooding in a lot of houses. But if you look at their backyard, it's simply grass and sod. And after many years in Georgia, it simply is hard pack impermeable surface at a certain point. And so we have a list of trees that really help mitigate stormwater and they help control stormwater. And so all of a sudden people are looking to the city and saying, hey, you controlled flooding on this lot. How did you do it? And I say, well, we looked closely and we said that we could plant bald cypress here and river birch and swamp white oak. And it looks beautiful and it's bringing more birds around. And they're acting as straws, sucking water out of the ground and transpiring it into the air. And so a huge outcome for us was getting this recommended tree species list presented to mayor and city council and actually getting it added to our technical manual, which is our part of our code ordinance code.
Hey, Willie, I want to do a quick time check, maybe about 5 more minutes.
Sounds good. Oh, wow.
And yeah, I know how it goes. And for the rest of you, we'll stay on past the top of the hour, and this is being recorded. So keep going, Willie. Thanks.
All right, so let me get back to where we need to be. So metrics for success, sustained canopy levels, 2-to-1 planting ratio. But where I really want to go to, I'm going to skip through some of this, and this will be available for you guys. But this is what I want to talk to you about, why we're partnering with Trees Atlanta and how we are contributing to the 1 Million Trees Initiative. For those of you who don't know, the state of Georgia has a gratuities clause saying that we cannot invest public dollars on private land. 95% of Sandy Springs urban forest is on private land. So this is the text of the gratuities clause. This is how Sandy Springs interprets it. We will not invest in forest and tree management on privately owned land. This is a very conservative definition and interpretation, but that is something that is handed down to me from our city management. But there is one exception to that interpretation, and that is our direct contract and agreement with Trees Atlanta. This public-private partnership is our one lever to get plantings done on private land. And I can't stress that enough because we've been working so hard to conserve forest on public land. We're trying to convince people to conserve trees on their own land, but people are often reluctant to invest in such efforts. And so the city said, hey, we will set aside X amount of dollars from the tree fund to allow Trees Atlanta to plant on your property. And so the way we define public good is that if you plant a tree within like 15, 17 feet of the right of way, that tree is actually contributing to shade of the road. You know, it's helping mitigate stormwater, it's helping clean the air, or it's adding a sense of place. And so we have found that what the city can't do, Trees Atlanta can do. And so for those of you at the municipal side thinking about ways to plant trees on private land, working directly with a nonprofit or another organization could be an extremely effective way to get that done. Moreover, the city is not actually giving private landowners money to plant on their property, but we're giving the money to an organization with a known track record. And so if you see here, we are a part of the Front Yard Tree Program and their Neighborhoods Program, which plants in our parks. But I just wanted you guys to take a look at this list, you know, white oak, overcup oak, willow oak, tulip poplar, and river birch. These are phenomenal trees, and they come in 15-gallon buckets, you know. And so this is a great way for people to get introduced to the idea of reforesting their land. And so through our partnership with Trees Atlanta, we have planted hundreds and hundreds of 15-gallon bucket trees. And so those are young trees, right? And we're doing a young tree training program, but then I go ahead and plant 2.5 caliber inch trees and above in tandem with these 15-gallon bucket trees. And what that does is it starts to build in succession so that we have trees of all ages and all types of species diversity. So by the time I'm long gone in 10, 15, 20, 25 years, we are growing a forest today that will be healthier tomorrow. One thing I will say, because a lot of people like to talk about how do you conserve trees, how do you maintain them? The city of Sandy Springs, actually, what I do with our contractors is when we price out planting a tree into the ground, that comes with 2 to 3 years of maintenance paid for in advance. And so I believe my cost to plant a tree in the ground is $750. I work directly with nurseries and distributors to get healthy, amazing trees. I select the stock myself for about $250 to $300, and for another $450 to $500, a contractor will plant that tree, and they own that tree for 2 years to ensure that it gets established and the roots are coming out, and we can actually do a plant healthcare program with them. And so, as you can see, we are trying to plant more. Our public land is out of space, and so that's where this partnership with Trees Atlanta really helps. We're doing our part to contribute to this 1 million trees initiative, but since we don't have a lot of space, I'm trying to take my learnings and share them as much as possible. And so we actually have created a little bit of a working group with a lot of our neighboring municipalities to try to share our learnings and, most importantly, our failures, so that one person does not have to repeat the mistakes of another. I think that's my time here, and I don't want to keep you guys too long. And again, my information will be available at the end of this presentation if you guys want to reach out and ask more technical questions directly.
Thanks, Willie, and thanks, Judy. This is so good. This was exactly why I wanted you guys to present. Willie, could you stop sharing your screen as we keep chatting here? Like I said, I learned from Trees Atlanta, and that support and shared responsibility is exactly what I was hoping for with these types of things, to have that kind of regional approach. So we are at 2 minutes to the top of the hour. We'll keep going a little bit afterwards. If you can stay on, great. We'll keep answering a few questions. And this is being recorded. I've dropped the ISA CEU link in the chat. So if you are seeking ISA CEUs, there is the form, so you can fill it out there. Judy and Willie, I think maybe there was a lot of questions, but I'd be curious what you think the top success and main pitfall was with launching this. What would you, if you can, distill it down to like, here's what you should do, here's what you should not do.
I don't know if there's anything that you shouldn't do per se. I think that the most important thing to do is when you're going into this is to really get your expectations in alignment. I don't want to dismiss the importance of actually reaching a particular goal to plant trees, but really we picked 1 million out of the air. We picked 1 million because it was a big number. People like big numbers, as we call them, BHAGs, right? But the intent and the most powerful aspect of doing a collaboration like this is the partnership with other organizations, whether it's nonprofits or your contiguous cities, but it's the attention that you bring to the effort that really is the takeaway. One of the things that I guess that we learned from being a community forestry organization is that you just cannot plant enough trees as an organization or a city by yourself. It has to be at the grassroots level. You have got to capture the attention and the intent of the community members. I saw a question that went by. They were like saying, how do you convince people about taking down, they get requests to take down trees because they're afraid of falling trees. That is an emotional, educational element that we have to spend more time working on. And programs like the 1 Million Trees gives you a structure to have those conversations with your community. That's the biggest takeaway in my mind.
Willie, anything you'd share to that?
Yeah, I would ditto everything that Judy just said. Really going in with intentionality is super important. Following through with your community. I think that one failure that I would like to address is that there was a lack of oversight for a while in the city. And so I'm going around fixing a lot of plantings and removing and replacing trees that were maybe planted too close, or they weren't planted in the right place, right time, right location. And so I will always say, folks, don't just plant to plant. Don't plant for reporting purposes. Don't plant to feel good, but plant because it's the right thing to do. A lot of people want to, when they do large scale plantings, they want an immediate effect. So they'll plant all these trees super close together so it looks like a forest. But then if you think about it, how can you plant 60 white oak trees on a 1,000 acre lot, or a 1,000 square foot lot? Just because they're young now doesn't mean that they will be young forever, and you're actually stunting these trees and setting them up for failure. And so again, being super intentional and planting with more of a scientific background, I think is really important. One success that we've had is the fact that we can leverage our community. um, People want to stay elected. And so the way that we get policy passed and initiatives passed is activating the voting group. They can reach out to their city council members, to their mayor, to whoever it is and say, hey, we want you to do this. We voted you into office. And if you don't do this, we will find somebody who will. And so remember that the voice of many are much more powerful than the voice of a few. And so that if you have a neighborhood, get that neighborhood association going. If you have a volunteer group, get that volunteer group to go mobilize more people. And I found that instead of trying to convince the people at the very top, convincing the people that make the base is what can contribute to large scale and lasting change.
Well, thanks for that, Willie, because I think a couple things with your comment there with these million tree campaigns or 500,000. Well, while they're good from the marketing side of things, us in the biz get so worried about the maintenance side or like that push to hit number, hit number, hit number. You got to get this target. So it's easy to say that you just to make the best decision, but how? Like maybe Judy, you could start this answer. How do you help cities feel comfortable if they haven't met their goals? Because people are very goal oriented, but also push them because you're trying to hit these numbers too.
Yeah. Most cities don't have goals. So that is one of those things that, you get to after you share the skill of even being able to track the number of trees that they have within a community. And a lot of cities don't have the budget to even do an assessments, but there are options that you can get more general assessments, like through American Forest or through iTree or other people they have, or the actually the tree equity program actually can give you a rough estimates without even investing in anything, because in the United States that is. But I'm sorry, Leslie, I started getting all off track and I forgot the core of the question.
Oh, just that your push to hit target. push to hit numbers, but also
yes.
want to do right tree, right place. Does this make sense? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess, I'm less purist. I'm like, I do believe that getting the tree in the ground is number one because there is a survivability issue within urban trees. There is a short lifespan. The trees that we often plant on right of ways are not going to be 100 years old. If we get 10 or 15 years out of them, sometimes we consider that lucky. In the city of Atlanta, for example, many of you guys might be surprised that our street margin where we're allowed to plant can sometimes be 18 inches wide. So there's a lot of dynamics involved in that. And I think I want to go back to what Willie said is we price in the cost of 2 years of maintenance with that tree. If you don't do that in the front end and you don't have a strong organization that ensures a robust maintenance budget, and I don't know a city that has a robust maintenance budget, it is going to be very difficult. So I would advise that any kind of pricing include at least 2 years of maintenance in it, because in the Atlanta area, if we can get that tree to survive for 2 years, it's pretty set and ready to go on its own after that.
Yeah. Well, we're at 5 minutes past. I think I'm just gonna ask one more question. There's so many good ones out there, and I apologize we can't get to them all. And this probably is a good conversation to come back to at another point. But I think it's the public outreach part. We had a lot of people talking about trying to convince someone to plant a tree in the right of way. You talked about the will, Judy, the will and the means. Willie, maybe you could talk about how you guys are doing public outreach. Either one of you could take that. How do you let citizens know a tree's coming to them, either in the public area or in their front yard, private property?
Man, we try to hit every check mark, right? We'll send out mailers. I will personally go door to door and leave my business card. We'll hold public meetings, to address all concerns. But again, what I have found that is our word is not as good as a community member's word. And so what I do is often ask around in that neighborhood, hey, who's kind of the hot shot around here? Who's the model family? And if we can get them on board, if we can get that individual who's the lookout and they can talk to the neighbors directly, that is a much more soft approach. And so I have found that with just a few successes with the right people, that influence can spread very quickly. And then last but not least, as somebody who is part of the youth tree team, I do a lot of kids programs with their schools, and I convince kids that the trees are important. And no parent wants to let their child down. If that tree is cleaning the air, stopping the flooding, giving homes to birds and squirrels, that child will hug the tree and stop the parent from cutting it down. And that is so powerful. And so again, being comprehensive and novel in your approaches, and remembering that it doesn't have to be so serious. Being fun in your marketing, being more forgiving when you're charging people for violations, saying, hey, we'll lower the fine this time, but let's try to plant more. And people will see that you are an organization, you are a government worth working with. And you are not just a stick, but you have the carrot as well. Helping people understand that we're working towards the same goal is super important.
Yeah.
If I could add to that, I think one thing that we didn't have a chance to discuss is about we get very focused in on a very particular way to do outreach in communities, especially as we rely on digital channels. It is very important to Trees Atlanta, even in a small footprint like Metro Atlanta. However, in every community, there are going to be people you need to reach that are not digitally connected, that do need the door-to-door. You might want to explore reaching them through local religious organizations like churches, other trusted community members. One of the things that we're being very mindful of is speaking to communities and members of the communities that don't look and act like us. So whatever you do, to please take a moment to kind of like sit back and engage as many diverse members of your community as possible to make sure that you are not unintentionally leaving somebody out because we're falling back into the way that is most familiar with us to communicate.
Well, thanks so much, Judy and Willie. That's really great. I know, again, we had a lot of questions. I for one, very much like these types of tree planting campaigns because I appreciate the marketing side and that pushing towards something greater. And even if we don't meet it, at least we've pushed someone and our communities a little bit harder than they might have done otherwise. So I'm guessing it's something we'll come back to again. Thanks everyone for being part of this. Thank you to our speakers, and we will wrap here. And I'll follow up with an email too with more information, contact, and the links and everything. So hope to see you in January. Thanks everybody.